sovereignty of our country, bounded by 3 oceans and the world's longest coastline, depends on our maritime capabilities. And I want to salute the women and men of Canada's Navy. First, we need to be aware of what's in, what's over, and what's under our vast territory. And that's why we're investing in a new fleet of P-8 Poseidon patrol aircraft. That's why we're investing in Arctic over-the-horizon radar. Secondly, we obviously need to be able to defend those waters, which is why we're building 15 River-class destroyers and an entirely new fleet of polar icebreakers and Arctic patrol vessels. And it's why we're here today, to announce an ambitious investment in new best-in-class submarines. Today, as part of our commitments to defend Canada and to support our allies, I'm pleased to announce that Canada has selected TKMS as the preferred supplier for Canada's patrol submarine project. But there's more to come. We will now enter into negotiations to procure up to 12 submarines. What I can confirm today is that we have already provisioned for the costs of purchasing these submarines in our fiscal framework. It's already in the budget. And I can confirm that this procurement will be the largest in Canadian history, and that by design, and Doug Guzman just alluded to this very lightly, by design, this process will have far and away the greatest economic impact of any defense investment right across Canada.
Canada has finally chosen its next submarine. Now, it's the biggest naval decision in decades, and it says a great deal about where Canada believes future threats are coming from. And what do we mean by that? Well, Canada has selected the German-Norwegian submarine design to replace the aging, well, should we say the antiquated, Victoria-class fleet. And the decision aligns closely with NATO priorities while strengthening Canada's Arctic presence. It represents far more than a procurement announcement. It signals a major shift in Canada's defense posture. And let's just bring up a couple of things here so we can have a look at this in a little more detail. First off, this isn't just a $24 billion purchase. It actually will work out to $100 billion over time, Canada's largest military procurement ever. Now, NATO and the Arctic beat faster delivery time designed specifically for Arctic and under ice conditions. And Canada is not just buying a strategic partnership here. No, it's not just submarines leading to expanded defense industrial cooperation. So there's a whole host of things going on here, Eddie, with this particular purchase and decision. And as we said, it's the largest when you factor it all in over the years, including maintenance, building the bases and the infrastructure to service them and everything else. It will turn out to be, at this stage anyway, Canada's largest military procurement ever. Now, the South Koreans were in the bidding as well, and it came down to the South Koreans in this consortium between Germany and Norway. So they were, both of them offering all kinds of industrial benefits, financial benefits to Canada. And yes, the South Koreans could deliver the submarines sooner. But what this gives us and NATO, because we are becoming more closely aligned with Europe and all of our European partners, it gives us greater interoperability. And also, these subs are designed for Arctic waters and under ice operations. So they fit in a lot better. And I remember, I think it was last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, where the consortium came back and said, look, we can deliver the first sub because they're still kind of in the finalizing of the planning and procurement, as far as supplies are concerned, stages. But they were saying that they could deliver the first sub no later than 2036. Now, that's 10 years down the road, and it may come in a little bit sooner than that anyway, because I remember during the frigate program, there is still, from that gleam in your eye, it's like a pregnancy. From that gleam in your eye until 9 months later, there's a lot of things that happen. And 9 months goes by pretty quickly. And 10 years or sooner will go by just as quickly. And but we'll, with our European allies, we're all going to be on the same page pretty much as far as this sort of thing is concerned. And why are we concerned about the Arctic? Well, let's put it this way. Global warming is also hitting the Arctic. And the ice pack is starting to melt a bit, which means the Northwest Passage shipping lane is becoming more accessible without icebreakers or having ships jammed in the ice until summer.
For a longer season, yeah.
Yes. And that opens up our waters to the Russians and the Chinese, both of which are very much interested in our Arctic. And why? Well, of course, gives them a more direct access to some of our critical minerals. And also, if they want to come rolling in on down through and try and take us over, and then go knocking on the doorstep of the U.S., there they are. So we need to get serious, and the Carney government, and Carney in particular, seems to be really, really very serious about protecting our Arctic sovereignty. And he makes no bones about it. It's the Russians and the Chinese we have to worry about. And also, I've read a couple of different articles which have suggested that the Russians have been busy building new forward bases on their side.
Yeah.
So, yes, it's going to protect their sovereignty as well. However, it's all, we need to look upon that not only as them protecting their sovereignty, but them also using that as a stepping stone to launch some kind of an attack on us. I don't have a problem with it. There will be financial gains across the country as we work with the consortium to develop the submarines. And as I say, hopefully, once things really get rolling, I hope we can get them in the water sooner. And I recall back during... Go ahead.
No, well, I was just going to comment, Gary. It's something you and I discuss very often over our coffees during the course of Night Talk Canada, and prior to that, where both you and I were concerned about Canadian sovereignty. And both of us were very critical of the previous governments of Canada not doing very much for our military forces here in our commitments to NATO and for defending ourselves. We're going back to the turbulent Trudeau governments, the Liberal governments, back into the Conservative Harper government. So both our political parties and leaders of those political parties, while they were in charge, did very little for our country and our sovereignty. So, you know what? You and I were hoping that one of the things that Mr. Carney would do, or whoever the prime minister was before the elections, really took an aggressive look at what we needed to do to bolster up our military defenses. And to tell you quite honestly, I think Mr. Carney is in overdrive, and he used that as part of his election platform in terms of bolstering up our military capabilities. And you know what? He's done so quite frankly in leaps and bounds. If you look at the last 15 to 16 years of the lack of support that our federal government gave to our military. You look at the over-horizon technology that we're working with the Australians in deploying up north. Not a U.S. solution, but an Australian solution, which we're going to be deploying. You look at the drive by Prime Minister Carney to bolster his relationship with the European Union and NATO for that fact, while we have a present ally called the United States or supposed ally called the United States, knocking on the door and saying they want to pull out of this thing. So, Canada is cozying up to a group of countries that are like-minded and are looking at defending its sovereignty from the two aforementioned, the Russians and the Chinese, and who knows, maybe the Americans later on in time. But let's just stick with those two, and aggressively pushing that. The discussions of the Saab Gripen, as opposed to the F-35, being thrown on the table for discussions. The acquiring of this submarine technology. There's just so much, and let's not forget about the aerial surveillance systems that are going to be developed jointly between Saab and Bombardier. Another agreement with the European country. So, you know what? If you look at the writing on the wall and on the desk, it seems very, very, very symbolic and likely that we are trying to wean ourselves away from American dependency. This is just one way of doing it. Not cut ourselves off entirely, because they are still they are neighbors to the south. We're still allies, defending this particular part of space in the world. We're still going to be working with them, but not 100% dependency with them, which is I think part of the mantra and part of the platform that the Liberal government or the Carney government has put on the table since day one. And I'm kind of feeling a little patriotic today, Gary, because of this decision, because whether they went with the Tyson Krupp or they went with Hanwha Ocean from Korea, either way, a decision was made, Gary. Line drawn in the sand, we've just crossed it, and now we're going to move forward with it, as opposed to just committee after subcommittee, and then you have the opposition critiques, and then you have the discussions, and la 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 la. 15 years go by and nothing happens. Stuff is happening, Gary, and I'm as a Canadian citizen, I'm very pleased that things are actually happening. And he's going to move forward with this. Damn the pundits. You know what? Good on Canada. Good on Carney. Good for NATO. And good for our alliance and our association with other European powerhouses to build both our economies, German economy, the Norwegian economy, and most importantly, the Canadian economy through this joint venture. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Now, I just popped a question in a few minutes ago into the chat, and it is, does buying submarines make Canada more secure or simply satisfy NATO and ultimately U.S. expectations? And we already have a comment in there, which is up on the screen. And I like the question that they raise. Should we start a nuclear program?
Whoa.
That's really opening a can of worms. And good for you to bring that up, because I remember...
That, have we? That's a nice one. Nice question.
Yeah. And I remember, back through the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s, that was the question. Why are we not investing more in, nuclear capability? And the whole thing was that at that time, Canada was a respected peacemaker in the world, and that it was looked upon that possessing nukes would detract from that, and I guess in a roundabout way detract from our ability and credibility as a peacekeeper. Because if you may remember, Eddie, that there were a number of global conflicts, smaller ones, that popped up all over the place, and one of them that sticks out in my mind was in Cyprus. And Canada was always the first, or among the first nations called upon by the United Nations, when the United Nations actually had some kind of clout, to form a peacekeeping unit and go in and try and settle things down. So we, and Lester B. Pearson, one of our former prime ministers, was known basically as a prime minister of peace, and if I remember correctly, he was honored for his positions
Nobel.
as far as our peacekeeping, and jumping in on, being the first to jump in on peacekeeping issues. So
Didn't he win the
there you
Nobel
have
for
it.
that? I think he did, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
I believe you're right.
Well, we have ciphers, Gary, and don't forget the Arab-Israeli war. I mean, Canadian
Yes.
flags, along with the UN flag, were deployed in between some horrendous armies, huge armies. So, yeah, Canada has always been known as being first in terms of peacekeeping efforts under the United Nations flag. And yeah, I guess so. We've been looked upon as peacekeepers. But Gary, let's think about this. I think Canada can still be considered peacekeepers, even though we don't have the ultimate in weapons technology being nuclear weapons. And Lockheed's, that's a great question. I actually never ponder that in a discussion myself. Should we have nuclear weapons? My attitude has always been, well, we got the United States to protect us. We're allies. And I think, as Carney said over in Davos, you know what? We got to look at absolutely everything, because everything's been overturned on the table because of things we talked about religiously over many episodes. We just can't depend on the states and the United States anymore, and I think the world has seen that too. Again, Gary,
look at what we witnessed.
Should we develop nuclear weapons? Sorry about that, Gary. Sorry. Should we develop nuclear weapons? Whether we can or not, okay, is another question to be asked. Do we have the technical know-how in developing something like that? Absolutely freaking yes. We've been at the forefront of high-end technological developments all the time, Gary. From the Aerojet to our CANDU reactors, our capability and knowledge of nuclear sciences is right up there with most powerhouses on the planet. So surely, if our government decides that we should stock ourselves and protect ourselves of nuclear weapons, we certainly have the capability. Now, whether other countries, and country left unmentioned, would allow us to pursue such a program is a whole different story. But yeah, should we have one? I don't know. Can we build them? Absolutely. Will we be allowed to build them? We'll see what happens. Great question.
Well, it is, and now Deborah in the chat brings up the point about we are bound to NATO obligations, and we're in danger from the north, but even more recently from the south. And more Canadians are beginning to feel that way, that in fact we can no longer trust our neighbors to the south, or should I say maybe the administration and its supporters to the south. We can no longer trust them. And all you have to do is just go back over the last 2 or 3 days and watch what the President of the United States, when he was awake, by the way, not nodding off during meetings, what he was saying about any and all of the allies in attendance.
Yeah.
He just, pretty much everyone. Really? And he's still smarting about nobody helping in the war with Iran.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as it was explained, and even our own Prime Minister said to him, NATO is defensive only.
It's a defensive entity, correct?
Yes. Defensive, not offensive. You started the war. You started the war without any real significant planning, no kind of exit plan or exit plans to get out of it. And what you're trying to do, and you can smell this one a mile away, is you're looking for somebody or some people or countries to come in and kind of take it over while you very quietly, well, you really don't do anything quietly, but while you slither away like a snake
Mm-hmm.
and wash your hands of it, you know what, big boy? You got yourself into this. Get yourself out of it.
Agreed.
And can you imagine if the shoes had been reversed here and that was Joe Biden or even Barack Obama sitting in a NATO meeting, not on one occasion, but on 2 occasions, 2 days, falling asleep
Yeah.
during the meetings, the heavy-duty stuff. And then he goes off on Spain, dumps all over Spain,
Yeah.
dumps all
Quite
over the rest of the
aggressively.
allies for not, supporting them and spending enough. And then the awkward handshake with the Prime Minister of Italy. A week ago, 2 weeks ago, he was talking about getting a restraining order against her. What?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because she wanted pictures of him, and oh my God.
And did she ever give, like he tried to put on this phony front shaking her hand for the official picture. And I watched that video clip at least 3 times. And man, oh man, he is stunned if he did not feel the heat and the daggers coming from those eyes when she looked at him. Whoa!
Yeah.
It was like watching a missile launch against him. But anyway, he's too thick to even realize, apparently, because he just toddles along. Anyway, that's him, and I don't want to talk anymore about him because it's
Well, the point
not
being is that
waste.
we can't trust. The point being, we can't trust that administration, whereby we have to get out of our comfort zone as Canadians and look at other ways where we can A, protect ourselves, and B, continue our membership in a protected alliance with Europe and NATO, without having to depend on that administration. Like you said, clearly, we just can't depend on them because you'll have a decision made one day, and the next day you have a bowel movement and something else happens, right?
Yeah. And apparently,
That's great.
we're being called out on even mentioning the guy to the south.
Yeah.
But given how disruptive in a lot of ways he was to this very important NATO session, and credit to all of the other leaders there, they managed to get some business done.
Yeah.
Despite the antics of his nibs. So that's a good thing. Now, what I'd like to do, Eddie, is just bring up. Let's talk about Canada and our defense spending right now, because it is amazing. Here, and there was a deal announced at the meeting today, another one, and I don't have the details on it in front of me, unfortunately. But as of earlier this afternoon, before the Prime Minister announced this other deal, this is what we have. The subs, that's a $24 billion acquisition for 12 subs, but the overall lifetime, repairs, equipment, updates, bases, infrastructure, $100 billion. River-class destroyers, new naval surface vessels, $22 billion. And I'm sure that they will start replacing the aging, and it's hard to believe that the frigates are reaching that stage in their life, because I remember covering the commissioning of the first frigate when it was launched.
How the Americans' jaws dropped in awe in terms of
Yes,
its capabilities in those days.
exactly. And yes, there were
I think our submarines
delays.
are going to be the same thing. Our subs are going to be the same thing, Gary. Jaw
Oh,
dropping.
for sure. For sure. And as I say, there were delays and everything with that particular program and some overruns. But it was all put into perspective by one marine engineer that was brought in from Scotland. And he said, you have to remember, Canada has not built a naval ship since during the Second World War. And this was in the 90s, the early 90s. And he said, this is like starting out and designing the shuttle. So, yeah, there will be some setbacks and there will be some things, but in the dry dock in St. John and the assembly building, where they put together sections of the ship inside and then moved them outside and joined them together like a Lego piece, was designed as well because at that time we were talking about replacing the subs. And that never materialized, but they designed that building so they could do it. They could build them and launch them and then bring them in and bring them inside when they needed a refit or repairs and repair them inside and then put them back out. That's all gone now. Just gone. Anyway, that was that. The rocket system, the HIMARS rocket system from Lockheed Martin, $2.6 billion. And so far, that's the only thing from the U.S. Then we've got the aircraft, the early warning radar aircraft that's built on a Bombardier executive jet frame, and Saab is involved in that, and that's a multi-billion-dollar, and it's in active negotiation. The final pricing on it. But that's going to be huge because those planes are going to be built here in Canada. And one or two of the European countries put orders in for them in the last week or so. And again, they're going to be built here. So we have that. And then we have the Arctic over-the-horizon radar system. And that's a deal that was signed with the Australians. And that's $2.5 billion for the direct technological acquisition contract and over $6 billion in infrastructure installation and integration in the high north. And you know, the last time I heard the U.S. mention its Golden Dome radar protection for North America, the price had jumped, and all of a sudden, out of the mouth of the leader of the United States came, they're going to pay $60 billion, $60 billion, I think it was.
60, yeah.
Why? And you know what? We don't need it anymore. So you build your little Golden Dome over your part of North America, and we'll look after the rest of it with our Australian friends. So, but the amount of money on the table there now, just in this one graphic, never mind the deal that was announced today, is just totally amazing. And yes, it's a lot of money, but we have not done anything with our military other than buy Band-Aids for decades. And that's why now, in order to play catch-up and get out, in front by a leg, that's why we're spending money the way we're spending. But in the long run, Eddie, it's going to have an economic spin-off all the way around for people in Canada. And it's also going to help us develop our technology and put us in the forefront.
Well, we're looking at tens of billions of dollars over decades that are going to be invested in Canada for us to actually build and maintain all of these military systems. I mean, you're looking at different industries, defense, you're looking at industrial domains, critical minerals, as you mentioned before, technology, all kinds of things. The city of Halifax is euphoric over this decision because the Halifax will again become a military portal for naval assets. They're already speaking about the boost in the economy of Halifax going as a result of everything we're going to have to build, right? And then at the same time, I'm not talking about putting a black spin on this, but it's a good problem to have. You're going to have all these people moving into Halifax who are already having a problem with housing. That the complaints that the housing price is going to go up. So, you know what? It's a demand and supply thing. Overall, it's going all these projects, Gary, are going to contribute to Canada coast to coast, north to south, in some form or another. And you know what? This is exactly the kick in the arm that a country needs in terms of being able to surf through the global economic turmoil today by projects like this. You know what? Congratulations to the Canadian government on this. Even congratulations to the opposition. In some form or another, they drive a lot of what's going on with the governing Liberal Party. There are a lot of good people in opposition that have a good head on their shoulders and are saying that we need to be able to defend our borders better, except for a few which I won't name right now. But yeah, I think this is how government is supposed to work. Official leader party in charge, the official opposition keep the Liberal Party and the government in check, while we continue to move forward by leaps and bounds, and we'll continue governing in this fashion. I'm actually very proud to be a Canadian today, Gary. This was a good thing for us.
Well, no question, Eddie. Defense spending is good for the economy, creates a lot of jobs, and here we are. We're developing into a country once again that will be at the forefront of technological development and weapon systems. You can't, to me, you can't go wrong, and there will be definitely a long-term return on investment, both financially and from a sovereignty standpoint, that we will be able to defend our sovereignty if the need arises. And we will have partners we can depend on in Europe, and we will have that ability to operate with them on a level playing field and still maintain our own decisions over what we are doing with the equipment that's being produced that we are using as well. So it bolsters research and development in the long run as well for Canada. You go back to the Arrow.
Yeah.
And we saw what happened with that when Canada rolled over and said to the U.S., okay, we'll stop. And they terminated the program and ditched all of the prototypes that they had. And where did a lot of those people end up?
NASA.
Exactly. And what did they end up working on? The space shuttle program.
Yeah.
And what did the shuttle remind you of every time you saw it? The Arrow.
Yeah.
So there you have it. So, we are moving from symbolic defense spending now toward long-term strategic capability, and our whole standing within the NATO group within Europe has shot up substantially. And I think overall, because of what we're doing and the amount we're spending now, and our size and our importance, both from a mineral standpoint, an oil standpoint, natural gas standpoint, and the North and the Northwest Passage, I think we are going to be taking more now of a leadership position in NATO, mm-hmm. and in working with our European allies that we haven't had in the past.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. We're a mid-sized power, and go back to the Davos speech earlier this year. The world is changing, and it's the mid-sized powers that are going to break loose of the old way of doing things. It's easier for us to do it in a whole lot of ways, and just because some of the larger powers in the world are just stuck in a time capsule.
Yeah.
Simple as that. So I really think it's going to pay long-term benefits for every Canadian over time.
Absolutely.
I really do. And our takeaway, Eddie?
What's your takeaway, Gary?
Well, it's this.
Yeah.
Canada isn't just buying submarines, it's redefining its role within NATO.